Okay, so today we have Kelsey Hargadine here with us.
Hello, Kelsey.
Hi, guys.
And so we're just gonna jump in and get started. I think we wanted to start off with just our little 5-minute life story. So this is gonna be like how did you get to the point of where you are now, kind of thing, in 5 minutes or less.
Easy peasy.
So like start as like a child, I guess.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Gosh, 5 minutes or less. Well, I was born and raised in Southern California in a small town. And I grew up on a mountaintop. Mm-hmm. And funny, it's very similar to the small town I live in now.
Oh.
And my dad was LAPD, and so he drove 2 hours in and out each way to keep us safe from the city of LA.
That makes sense.
So that's where I was raised. It was awesome. We had horses and turkeys and chickens and all the things.
I did not know this.
And
little farm girl.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Deep down.
Deep. I put it down, pushed it back.
So, and growing up in a small town, my parents were, I would say at the time, religious. So there was a little Presbyterian church on the corner, a little white picket fence. And so we went there when I was growing up. So, and all of my friends. And there was a point in time when my best friend invited me to a church camp up in Hume Lake in California.
I love Hume Lake.
It's my favorite. If you haven't been, if you're, I don't know.
How do you love it if you've never been there?
One of my college roommates' family directed Hume Lake when she was little.
Okay.
So
It's very special. It's so cool. And so when I went, it was a winter camp, and I was asking a lot of questions about God and who the Lord is. And he was a pastor of a small church at the time. His name is Francis Chan, and he was a speaker. And he shared the gospel message in a way that I've never heard it. And I don't know if you've experienced this, but just that conviction and in your heart and in your spirit, you just knew like the response was yes. Mm-hmm. And I was all in, and I just was like, Lord, and I didn't know much about the Lord, the personal relationship you could have with him. And I just submitted myself. I said yes. And as soon as I did, I was weeping in this pew. I was 15, and I just remember an audible voice, and I didn't even know God could speak, but I just heard the word Africa. So I didn't even know that Africa was a continent at the time. I had no influence whatsoever of anything remotely African. I mean, one of my good friends was in elementary school, and she was African American, and her name was Ebony, and that was it. That's all I had. She's amazing, but no influence. So I remember I ran as fast as I could to the little like gift shop at Hume Lake at the camp, and I grabbed the first journal I could to write down what God had shared with me about that I was going to Africa or something about Africa. Well, I'll just fast forward. Weeks later, I'm home, and I look at the journal that I'm writing in, and on the front of it is this cover of really cool animals, but behind it is the outline of Africa.
No way.
And I didn't even know. It was like,
You're like, this is how little I knew about Africa.
You're like, once I looked up a map and saw the shape of Africa, then I knew.
It was the same. So imagine I ran home from camp, just so excited to share with my folks, like, oh my gosh, I accepted the Lord, I love Jesus, and I'm going to Africa. And my dad, Mr. LAPD, so protective, was just like, let's get through prom first. Let's talk about the next steps of what you want to do with your life. So it was something that I treasured and held in my heart, because I didn't go for several years after that, but I just held it in. And so in high school, I went to a Catholic high school, and they all thought I was going to be a nun and,
Me too.
go to a
I
convent.
I wanted to be a nun.
I mean, sounds kind of nice, but I was like, no, and I just knew I was supposed to go to Africa, and that was it. I didn't know there was 50 plus countries in the continent and where God was going to have me go.
Yeah.
So after that, I left California and went to Colorado Christian University in Lakewood in 2000. And
why did you pick there? Sorry.
Yeah, good question.
From California to
Colorado. It's like the California to Colorado pipeline.
Yes. I started it. No, I'm just kidding. I just wanted something different. And I wanted to explore, and I went and visited it, and I just fell in love with it. At that time, it was very mom and pop in the sense of like temporary buildings and a very, very small school environment. And I just loved the school. I loved the staff. I loved the professors. And that's what I wanted to do. So, and I was a little independent. Still am. So ended up there, and a year and a half in, there was a mission chapel at the school, and so there was a older, I should say. Actually, I don't know how old they were. Now that I am in my 40s, I'm like, actually, they were middle-aged couple with a table, and they were with Africa Inland Mission, an older mission from the East Coast, and they take students over to Africa somewhere for up to 6 weeks. And at that time, you couldn't find many trips longer than 2 weeks at a time, and I really wanted to go for a longer period. So I joined with them, and they set me up and sent me to Uganda, and they sent me to this remote village when I was 19. I went with a couple other gals and was gone the whole summer. And that's who I went with. And so I had no connection before that, and just showed up on the scene. And they drove, I remember the missionary couple, and we got to Uganda, and then we got in a bus and just drove. And I thought, we're going to the end of the earth. There is no human beings where we're going. And I didn't know the girls I was with. And so we were just holding on to each other and became close friends, and ended up in this remote village that had never seen white people in their life. And this pastor, and then there, by the way, I'm like 6 foot tall,
blonde, blue eyes,
and I blend really well in that culture. And if you know anything about Uganda, they're shorter, stockier, really dark, like, super dark. And so, but showed up. The pastor we lived with, I remember they just dropped us off in his compound. He barely spoke English at the time. I think turquoise was on sale because every building was painted in bright turquoise.
Yes.
And so I remember this turquoise house, and we all like shared a mattress on the floor with a mosquito net, and it was 100 degrees, and I absolutely loved it. I just fell in love. Like, we went around the community, and for the first time, I mean, granted, babies were crying, they see me and freak out, but I still loved it. I remember that trip, looking back, as like, of course, my first experience from Southern California is experiencing suffering for the first time, experiencing pain, experiencing poverty in ways that I had never experienced. But the takeaway really was this village pastor, who's probably in his late 30s at the time, didn't have much more than some rice and a Bible, and would go around and just share hope with people and speak life into people. And I was even asking the question, like, how can he do that? Right. How can he serve a God that has so much faith and so much hope when these people literally have nothing? And it was his faith that inspired me when I came back to go, I want to know more about the God that we serve, because he is out there speaking so much hope in a situation. I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And I just vowed in myself with the Lord, like, I knew I was supposed to continue to support him in some way. So at the end of the trip, there was 4 of us girls, and we all planted trees for him to remember us by. And I thought in my head, like, I do not need a tree to remember this man. But we planted and left, and not 3 years later, I was able to return. I had traveled the world, and I just knew my heart was to go back to that village, to that place, and see what Pastor Paul was doing, what was going on. And so I show up. The welcome is a welcome like you've never experienced. And that's all I'm going to say, because soon Kelsey and Beth are coming with me.
Yes.
And I'm going to leave it there to experience it for themselves. But after the welcome, we go back to his little home. We sit under a tree, have a soda. That's what you do, and catch up. And I remember him saying, Kelsey, I have a sad story. He's like, all the trees that the girls planted died. Like,
oh no!
Oh, sad. Okay, like,
That's terrible.
not great. And he's like, but the tree you're sitting under is yours.
Wow!
And I look up, and it's been only 3 years, and this tree is fully grown. And I look up, and as I looked down to look at him, I just knew something was coming. And he'd handed me a bound document. Lord knows where he bound it. And it had, I mean, it was the cutest thing. And on the front had ROWAN, Rural Orphans and Widows AIDS Network, to empower the widows from helplessness to hope, every widow a leader, every orphan a beloved child. And through the pages are beautifully rough printed pictures and mission and what he's already doing. He's meeting with 10 widows under this very tree and 10 orphans, and he's just doing what he can with what he has. And I just knew from that point on, I wanted to be his microphone. I wanted to be the microphone for what God's doing in this place, and project as much as I could what is happening.
Yeah.
And that was it. So I went back. And of course, like I studied communication. I love talking. So that's all I had behind me. I was like, I don't know fundraising, nonprofit management, finance, mobilizing, nothing.
All I've got is this tree.
I have a tree and a dream.
A tree and a dream.
So if you're listening, God can use anything, and He will. And there was so many opportunities for me to say no. And in that point, it was like just day by day, just my yes. Like, okay, what does it look like today? So I went back and I went to DU for grad school and studied Africa and development. Meanwhile, just learning with friends, and God provided experts to help start nonprofits, how to do the paperwork, how to set up the NGO in Colorado, for Pastor Paul in Uganda is his name. He set up his own NGO in Uganda under ROWAN. So we did all the admin, which I'm not good at, if you know me at all. And God just provided the right people. And He kept reminding me, Kelsey, it's okay that you're not an expert at one thing. You're a connector of experts.
Yes,
and
that's
how
very good.
to connect people together.
Yeah.
And just release me, because I was feeling so burdened when you're out there. And I was out there for so many years after, but you want to be a teacher, you want to be a doctor, you want to be a nurse, and like you feel so inadequate most days. And yet God brings to mind people to call, to connect, to invite. And that's kind of how it began. And that was my story. And so I've done a lot of jobs along the way, a lot of journey, a lot of travel. But ROWAN really is that stable force of like what God's doing, more so in the village, but also like in my life, and inspiring and equipping my faith.
At what point in your African journey did you find the very tall white man who was also in Africa?
Oh, him! Yeah, that happened. That was wild, you guys. I have so many wild stories, and on the airplane we'll talk. But where was I? So I was living in Uganda full time, one-way ticket, not moving back home. I was ready to be single and be in the village. I did not know that.
See, the common thread is all these people are just ready to be single missionaries, and then boom,
their
husband.
I'm telling you. And that was like no joke. I had relationships, and I just knew. I was like, this is it. So anyway, I was in Uganda, and I got invited by one of my favorite, I shouldn't have favorites, but I do, missionaries and inspires is Heidi Baker.
Oh, yeah.
And so I was invited to go down to her base in Mozambique for 3 weeks as a visitor and see all of her ministry, all her work, and really just learn so much from her of what they do down there to apply to ROWAN.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, where to? So I go, and there's like a visitor center. I have an intern with me, so we go, and we're traveling. Heidi Baker's there, so we're doing outreaches with the Jesus film. People are coming to life. I mean, like,
wow.
Healings and miracles, and it was. There's no words to express like the way that it equipped me for what I do now. All of a sudden, Thaddeus comes on the scene. So he came from Denver, and he came with the church, and he was a visitor as well. So he was in the same center, and we passed each other at the gate. I remember thinking, oh, there's a nice looking young man. And he was like, we talked for a bit, and he was so funny. But if you've been on the field long enough, you know that like, you're like, is he funny or is he American? Or like you can connect to the culture, and you're just like familiar.
You have the same sense of humor.
Yes.
Are they funny, or do I just get what they're saying?
Yes. And it was both. So we ended up hanging out and doing ministry together for 10 days, and I could tell he was maybe a little interested. And at that point, the Lord had told me in my journal, and I wrote it in my journal, He said, he's coming, and just look around the corner, but just keep an open mind. That's what he said. And I was willing and okay not getting married, but he said, just keep an open mind. So of course, I'm in Africa with short, stocky, dark men that may or may not speak English. So I was like, how open do I need to be? And so it was like, joke with me and the Lord. We just laugh and like, anyway, but it wasn't priority, but it was awesome. So as we're about to depart, and I'm going back to Uganda, and Thad is going back to Denver, he sits me on a bench, and he tells me that he's interested in me. And I said, well, there's no way. Like, I'm here, you're there, you live in a small town. I ran far from my small town. And I was like, I'm supposed to be here. And he said, well, all I can do is ask you to pray and keep an open mind. And I'm like, I literally look up at the sky, and I'm like, that's what you meant? I just was so...
You mean to say, that's what you meant?
take him back. So then, of course, I take a deep breath. I'm like, okay, we'll email. So we keep it up in mind.
That's so funny.
I email, and then he comes back to Denver, and long story short, I come back to the States for the holidays, spend time with him, and 3 months later, engaged.
Oh my gosh. I didn't
I
realize
did not,
it was that fast.
I didn't either.
It was really
Crazy.
fast. And really fast. And I kept applying for my visas to go back to Uganda, and they kept getting delayed. Meanwhile, we're dating. And got engaged. And Thad hopped on a plane with me, and we went back to Uganda. And he was there with me for almost over 2 months, I think.
Wow.
In Uganda.
I don't think I knew that either.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Getting to know Pastor Paul and
right after you guys had got married or
engaged.
Yeah.
Yes, so we were engaged. Went back, lived with some missionary family, and traveled back and forth. And I thought my life was going to look like I was going to be a missionary in Africa with that. Mm-hmm. And he just didn't realize it yet.
He's got to get with the program.
And I just kept waiting, and it wasn't happening. And he was enjoying his time, but he couldn't see himself moving there.
Yeah.
And so that was a real hiccup for us, and a lot for me with the Lord. Like, what is it supposed to look like? I thought I knew exactly what it was supposed to look like. And meanwhile, God had other plans. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up coming back to the small town he's from. And I thought, well, this is very temporary, we'll just be here for a while and then we'll move.
Uh-huh.
And 13 years later, I'm still here.
13 years later, we're all here.
We're all here. So, but I'm so thankful. I wouldn't have it any other way. And there's so much that's happened in those 13 years, but that's kind of our short story.
That's awesome. Wow. I know so much about you guys.
Yes. And so now you guys live in the small town that Thad is from. You have a daughter, and you've been here for 13 years just, and I'm sure there's a lot of details in that part of the story too. Just, God, what am I doing here? And we'll get into some of that, but just curious, how many countries have you lived in throughout your life?
Lived in, I would say 3, but I've traveled over 20 in my 20s. Okay. So, that's been such a joy, and something I absolutely loved in my 20s is being able to travel and basically do recruit and lead mission trips all over the world. So Uganda was just one of those places, but then I was able to go all over the place and live from Asia to Africa all the way across, which is very different.
What did your LAPD father think about that?
Oh, he didn't love it at first. And then he embraced the fact that that is who I am, and I really think now as a parent, like, there was more faith on their end to let me go at 19 than I can imagine. So since then, they've been able to travel to the places I lived and visit me and do things and travel in ways that I never thought they might.
And they've been to Uganda?
Yes, they both have.
That's awesome.
So that's been a joy. My mom is also the helps with ROWAN and our ministry with the books and finance, and really just walks with us. And my dad too helps in such a cool way. So it's definitely a family affair altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a couple podcasts ago in our Travel Hacks and Snacks episode, we talked a little bit about ROWAN and the situation they're in now, currently. So could you give us just a little summary of what does ROWAN look like now? What is your role with ROWAN? What does that look like?
Sure. In short, ROWAN started with heavy needs and challenges that have hence shifted over the years to different needs and challenges now. So when we started, it focused on HIV and AIDS as really like the silent, deadly war in the region, just killing generations of people, leaving children with their grandparents and great-grandparents. And that's kind of where we stepped in. Since then, stigma has lowered drastically because of our presence. We're there in over 70 villages in the remote east part of Uganda. But recently, about 2.5 years ago, we got word that there is an international mining company coming in to work to displace where we live. They found minerals literally under our feet for electric vehicles, specifically for America. So at first I thought it was a joke. More so just like, oh, it'll pass. Like, we hear things all the time. China's around the corner. They're always around the corner. But this was different. And so the last 2 years have been really a season of walking with people through their fear, through these women and security of losing the land, losing everything that they know. ROWAN as an organization is losing everything that it knows. ROWAN is there supporting hundreds of orphans through school We have a clinic and a maternity center. We have farms. We have 5 land titles of community that will be gone. And so at this point, we are working hard to, number one, ensure hope in the people that we serve, that we aren't going anywhere. We have no idea how it will look in the future, but we know that we're there for a purpose and that we are responsible to care for those in our care. So we are just there with them, walking with them, kind of pausing certain programs, refocusing our organization to looking forward on moving and what that looks like to ensure safety and security for the people. Meanwhile, like, we had to connect with local lawyers in Uganda we've never had to do before and learn about land rights and all of the things I've never delved into. But that is where we are. And there was seriously moments when I just was done. I was like, I don't know what to do. This feels so big. So many people out there are like, well, I'd love to help you. I just don't know anything about mining. I'm like, join the club. I'm like, I have literally no idea. And God's like, I can work with that. And he has since just brought in the right people at the right time, and just walked us through how to do this. And that's kind of where we are right now as we head back over, is to look into land to move. And the last 2 trips I've been has been really a season of mourning with the people, crying with, shock factor that we're possibly all this will be gone, and if not, praise God. But at the same time, this trip, when we go over, is really breathing hope into their tomorrow. It's looking forward and going, our time is not done, like, your future is bright. And to really ignite these people who have just, some have committed suicide, some have stopped farming, and there's been famine due to lack of farming because they've just given up. And we're there to step in and just say, we are here for you. Let's keep going. And God's going to show us how to do it. So that's kind of our current need that we're in.
And you might have already said this. How long has ROWAN been operational? Like, how many years are you talking here? Like, I'm thinking about all these people moving, but, like, how long has this been a thing? You know?
Yeah, we registered in 2008, so about 16 years it's been registered as an organization.
That's so crazy. Like, it's not just like, oh, we've been here for 1 or 2 years or 5 years. It's literally like we are a stable, organization that's been here for many years.
Yeah, long enough to build, like,
long
new
enough
buildings
for a tree to
and
grow. Years, trees take a long time, and I remember you posted a picture of that tree, and now I'm thinking about it. I think it was like your last trip there, and now all I'm thinking about, that's a huge tree now, and that takes a long time. So, like, thinking about that, like, this is a long time company that's just being uprooted, like a long time organization, long time village, like, it's just all being uprooted. It
is. And I think the mining company explored in our region and did tests for the minerals because they didn't think anyone was out there. We're the only NGO out there.
Oh my gosh.
There's, like, government schools here and there in part of it, but we are the only kind of threat. And we're in the village called Mwanga, right? And it's kind of funny because in a good way, we've been able to push back and require the mining company to do things right as much as they can. And we are now called the Mwanga Factor.
Oh, yes.
Never been a factor, but it's cool because we're now ones to consider when they're doing things, that they can't just bulldoze over these people. And most of these women don't have a voice, and there's been a way that a voice has been given to them and empowered. So as an American, at first, I want to get really loud. I want to tell the world the name of this company and who is responsible and write letters and call. Yeah. But it hasn't been the way that God wants us to do it. It's been from within and the people and empowering their voice. And it's been slower but it's the right way to do it. And it's been really beautiful to see and messy. It's on their timetable, which if you've been to Africa, is slow, really slow.
Yeah,
pole
sana.
But it's so that's where we're at.
And now with the Christmas campaign that ROWAN is doing called Preparing for Her Promised Land, we get to help empower these women to dream for their future. So can you tell us more about that as well?
It's like the most exciting campaign we've ever done. And 16 years in, we've done a lot of campaigns. But this one, I'm just so excited because when the women have been wanting to give up, And we look to land and looking to move and starting to look for planning. It's easy for our amazing local staff and amazing board members to sit in a room and design a village, model community of where these women are going to move, and they'd be excited about it. Mm-hmm. But that's not what God has asked us to do, and he's inviting these women into the process of their tomorrow. So these women, which most of their lives have never moved anywhere, like half an hour farther from where they live, and B, have never made decisions on dreaming for their future. They've just survived, and which is a great thing. But the beautiful thing is we're inviting them into dreaming for what it looks like for their future. And so this campaign specifically, Preparing for Her Promised Land, is preparing her over the next 6 months to look at what does she want to see for her future? What does she want to see for her kids' future? What does she want to see on this land? How does she envision the homes to look like? What kind of farming does she want to do? What does it look like to move with your friends and keep each other accountable to moving? And what investments does she want to make? And I don't think that they yet know what it looks like to dream, but I'm so excited that we're taking them on this journey. So when we go, I mean, imagine you're trying to talk about moving somewhere you've never been if you've literally never been anywhere. So we're going to bus 200 widows it's like about an hour and a half away to the source of the Nile River, which is right there in Jinja in Uganda, and have the women experience a river for the first time. This river is massive. And see the water, touch the water, and not only that, get in boats and ride down the river and see the birds, and they're going to freak out, and it's going to be so amazing. And then they're going to come back and they're going to eat food that they've never eaten before, and everything's going to be new, and it's gorgeous. And then we're preparing for facilitators to be there, and for staff, and for the community development officers coming to speak into them and to empower them to say, God is so good that where we're moving is going to be better than where we are. And you're going to experience fear and excitement, all the things you're experiencing today.
Right.
But that's going to help them to discover what's inside of them and what hope looks like for tomorrow in a new place. So we're preparing for that now. So January 12th, we're going to be busing all the women to the Nile, and we're going to have several experiences, both with the widows and the kids. The kids are going to go to these huge waterfalls.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
In February,
yes.
And they're so excited. And so I think these experiences are really going to kick us off into dreaming about moving somewhere they've never been, because this is going to give them a real tangible way to think through that and to dream with us. So, and we're going to surround them with the right people to talk through this, develop, and they're going to help us draw out and map out where we're going.
It's so awesome. I'm so excited. I can't believe we get to go.
I know. Like, wait,
So
you guys should come. Oh, wait, you are coming.
In like 2 weeks.
Yes.
Less than 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Crazy.
No, I'm so excited. I just can't. I mean, it's just so, I've always said, like, oh, I have this heart for, like, women and, like, all these things, but, like, these women that are completely have no idea, like, what it looks like to go to a river, or what it looks like to sit down and eat somewhere that's not their homes or in their community or whatever. And I'm just kind of excited. Like, I don't know what kind of food we're going to eat because I've never been to Africa before, but, like, I'm just so excited for them to try something they've never tried before.
We're trying to get cheeseburgers. And
that's what I was thinking.
Yes!
A cheeseburger? Like, if you've never had a cheeseburger before?
Yeah.
I mean, some are going to love it, some are not going to love it. All part of the experience, right? Like, okay.
It'll be so fun to watch them either way.
I know that. I literally was thinking a cheeseburger. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if they ate a cheeseburger? Oh, that's so cool.
I remember when we were dreaming for the Christmas campaign and even what to call it, you had this connection between the story of Abraham and the Promised Land, like preparing for her Promised Land. Can you tell us a little bit of that story too, or the connection there?
Yes. Well, of course, my husband always comes up with the best names, but we literally feel like ROWAN is like, in a way, in a Moses. You're taking these people into a land they've never experienced, and we don't know what's ahead. We know that there's probably mountains of challenge, and there's Goliath, and there's what we're in right now is the valley of preparation. But the rivers of hope is like what we're, the programs that we are and who we carry wherever we go. And so, all of the metaphor, and those following and supporting ROWAN know, like, that metaphor of our exodus into the Promised Land, it just felt so timely. The Lord has told me over and over again that that's kind of our role for ROWAN, and I didn't understand it until now. but it's a physical representation of physically taking almost 2,000 people and moving them.
Wow.
And it's only God can do it, but that's kind of the story in the Bible that really resonated with across both Uganda and the U.S. boards. To say, yes, let's do it.
That's so cool. I think I love those stories because God had his plan all along. He knew exactly what was going to happen with his people, but it just looked so completely different than maybe they had envisioned. And then, wandering 40 years in the desert with Moses, or Abraham leaving everything he knew. Like, there's always this element of, we know this piece, but there's so much that we don't know. We just don't know what's coming. We don't know what the promised land looks like. When we get there, there's giants, and that wasn't part of the plan. And just how God walks so faithfully with his people through that is just so cool. And it requires us to really know God and to really trust him. Like, he knows these orphans and these widows, and he knows us, and he knows the staff, and he knows what the best plot of land is for these people to move. And he knows, what will be the most encouragement to the surrounding community. And there's so much of that we just can't see. So it's exciting and it's scary to think about what might be next.
It's amazing when your total dependency upon God increases your faith. And that's literally where we are. And even as wild as it feels to move that many people and to feel so big, I'm so excited because God has to show up. We're completely dependent upon him to show us every step. And I just feel like that's where he wants us. So not that each of us in our lives have to move 2,000 people and walk that journey, but that's where he gets each of us, is to a place of total dependency, to where he goes, okay, now watch and see me work, because he does every time. And you don't have to get to that total place each time, but I don't know. I just feel like he's so pleased with our yes, even though we don't know what tomorrow looks like.
Yeah.
So in this whole season, all the mining stuff, all whatever, did you ever face any moments where you wondered, God, how did I get here? Is this really the plan? How did you handle that, and what that looked like?
All the time. I think the biggest enemy that the enemy uses in this season for me is comparison. I have a lot of friends in a lot of different nonprofits and a lot of different work that do amazing things. And it's so easy to look left and right and see what they're doing. Oh, I mean, they're doing so well. Why doesn't ROWAN just morph into with what they're doing?
Right.
Or I did that. Compassion was nearby when I was early on. And Compassion could just take this on. And continued to compare. And it robbed me so much of what God wanted to do in this story with me. Right. I remember the Gospel of Luke. I mean, many Gospels have been written about Jesus, same story, right? But Luke, it started out the Gospel saying, I too write these things to you, Theophilus. So he had a language in a way that he could speak to doctors, to speak to intellects in a way that the other Gospels couldn't. And he said the same story in a unique way. And God reminded me, I want to use the same story of my gospel message through you that can't be anybody else.
Yeah.
And to really own that was freeing for me, and going, okay, use me, and it has robbed me at times. There's been times I've wanted to give up. That's when it was so important to surround myself with amazing friends and family that continued to stand with me, and to remind myself that God isn't up there with an alarm clock and ticking, that I'm wasting time, that there is time to develop what he wants, and so much of it was in me first. So if that makes sense, I think the biggest challenge was comparison, but to recognize God has that story for you specifically for where you are in the season you're in.
So would you say that your time with ROWAN has changed you?
There's not a day that goes by that I don't thank God for ROWAN, and there isn't a day that goes by that something happens in me that I have a check in my spirit of perspective. And I'm so thankful for that I have that, because not everyone has that.
Right, exactly.
And I'm not saying I've been diligently, I honor that every time. There's some times that I struggle, but the perspective of it's not just people in Uganda, they're family. I've been to their weddings. I've watched them have babies. I've seen grandbabies. I've journeyed with them through college, and now some are lawyers and some are doctors and some are radio announcers, and to be able to go back and to know that the relationships are what is so sweet and important. Their family, whether Rowan's there or not.
Right.
It's forever changed me. Forever changed me. And that's why when it's time, I want to take her, and I want her to experience, not just experience Africa, but this family. And there's a way that across culture, across language, no matter what, like you're drawn closer to God and going, wow, they serve the same God that I do in Colorado. They like, just to be able to worship together, there's something so powerful that is forever and will forever change me.
That's really cool. So one of the things I relate to the most about you, Kelsey, besides our names are the same, and we both did ballet as children and did not play sports, and we have almost the same tattoo.
Yes.
Is that you have a life in two places, and so your heart is constantly like in America and in Africa, and I really relate to that. So what is it like for you to live in the small town that you're in now and be fully present there in the amazing things that God is doing, and also feel so at home in Uganda? What's that like for you?
Easier some days than others, for sure. When I first moved to the small town, it was very hard. But I also wasn't accepting where God had me and what he wanted for me in the small town. So it was always like, oh, I just wish I was there. Wish I was there. I could not fully root myself where I was. I will say, I think it's a beautiful growth with the Lord, because over the years I've learned to trust that being present where I am is what he's asking of me, and to trust that he's taking care of where I'm not. And being okay with that, and not feeling like I'm letting the other community down, or like, and there's times when I deeply miss the other community, like you would missing family back home, like you would anywhere. But to recognize where he's asked me to be is present. And also over the time of being the executive director and the founder of ROWAN, as well as living life here and finding that balance, I've had to make sacrifices. I get up very early every morning for Zoom calls to Uganda and communication, and make that a priority. But then when I'm with my daughter and when I'm with my family, I'm with them, and knowing that God's taking care of the others. So I think there's a lot of times I've felt imbalanced over the years of leaning toward one more than the other. But God has released me from feeling guilt for enjoying where I'm at and not being at the other place. But when I am in Uganda, I just am fully there. And a lot of my friends have said, and my husband included, like, you don't really know Kelsey till you go to Africa with her. And so
perfect. I can't wait.
So excited.
We're about to really know you.
But there is just like life that there's just a beauty in every culture we live in that brings out a beautiful side of you. And that I'm excited about. That really only in Africa can that happen. Yeah. And that's really, really special. And I feel like, because it's been over 22 years since I've gone, I grew up there in a sense. And so I feel like they are family. Yeah. So I'm excited to go home and, but at the same time, be present where I am.
I was just about to ask you, has your excitement, like over the years, you've been to Africa so many times, like, is your excitement still the same, like preparing to go again? Like, or sometimes you're like, oh, here I go again. Or like, are you always just so excited to go, quote unquote, home?
I am always excited for the most part.
Yeah.
I think the first time when I went, when mining was first news, my dear friend and board member Amber went with me. And that was a hard one.
Like, you didn't know what to expect.
Yeah. I wanted to be there, but I knew it was going to be a really hard trip.
Yeah.
So this trip going back, you never know what to expect. There's always surprises, and that's what I'm excited about. But this one, I'm most excited because we get to speak so much life into them, and to know the beauty for the people on the ground is that Kelsey keeps coming back. Rowan keeps coming back.
Right.
That there's some people that go once and never go back. But to know that, oh, she's committed, like, it just proves to them in a sweet way. And it's been 20 years of that. So just being able to go, I'm so excited. And because they're just as excited to see me. And that feels honoring. I'm like, who am I to have such a welcome or to do these things? Like, but just to receive from them, and they give what they can. that's what I'm most excited about. And it's different every time.
Yeah, and I mean, people have said you're bringing the joy bomb, so.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be so fun.
I know it's gonna be hard, but I'm really excited that we get to bring joy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Like, it's gonna be hard to break through at first, but I feel like, you know, once they're like accepting of it, like the joy that we're gonna bring to them is gonna be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
In such a hard situation. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So going back to when you were at Hume Lake at 15, if you were to go back to that 15-year-old Kelsey and just tell her something about what was to come or the calling that God had put on you at that point in your life, what would you say?
Oh gosh.
Not to, spring a huge question on you.
Huge question.
We did not give any of these questions to Kelsey ahead of time, by the way.
She's answered them perfectly, okay?
I would tell 15-year-old Kelsey, buckle up, be patient, and it's not going to be what you expect. No matter what. But that the God that has spoken to you is the God that's going to walk you through each and every day. And he is the most important thing. But I think the biggest setback outside of comparison has been expectations, and to let go of expectations and to trust the voice that audibly spoke to you, that the God who spoke to you at 15 is the same God. He's going to continue to speak to you, and to keep listening and to keep going after what he says, that it's all more real than you realize. That's what I would tell you.
That's really good. Along the way of going back and forth to Africa, I'm sure you've had many highs, many lows, maybe some missed flights, some things that didn't quite go right, or some funny stories. So do you have any of those type of stories to share with us?
So many. We don't have time for all of them. But there's just one story that I remember. I was in Uganda, and Pastor Paul, the founder, his oldest son was getting married, and he wanted me in his wedding. So traditionally over there, the bride rents the wedding dress. And so the day of, they're getting ready, and I'm in the wedding, but I don't have the bridesmaid dress. And it's literally 5 till. If you know Africa, it's like, okay, what's happening? I'm just sitting there waiting. And so all of a sudden, someone drives by and throws all the bridesmaid dresses at us.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, dear God, I hope this fits. And so they hand us the dress, and I kid you not, we're in rural Uganda. So you have to wear like sleeves and long dresses, like to cover your knees, because shoulders are attractive, knees could be attractive.
Whoa.
Watch out.
Love
So
a good knee.
very watch out. So meanwhile, I'm putting on this bridesmaid's dress. Picture white satin, strapless bridesmaid dress that barely fit and almost fell off, and I am as white as a feather, of course. Is that even a thing? It is right now. And so I was in the wedding in a strapless white bridesmaid dress in the middle of the village, and I will show you pictures. It was awesome.
That's amazing. I think you'll have to send us that picture, and we can post it to the podcast Instagram.
I mean, literally, I look like an albino.
Oh
it's
my gosh.
really bad.
That's so
no.
Let me think of any other stories if you want to use. I mean, I have the one where I mooned 30,000 Christians.
I think you have to tell that one. It's not related to Uganda, but I think you have to.
Okay, that's a fun one. So on one of my travel journeys, I was in New Zealand, and I was at a Christian, think like Coachella for Christians. It was like 30,000 Christians, like 8 stages across, hundreds of acres of park. And so I went, and we were listening to music. If you know old school Christian music, it was Skillet on stage.
Yes.
And they were hardcore going after it. And so I was in like the row 3. We were moshing like no other. It was 100 degrees. My gum was disintegrating in my mouth. And it was so hot. So after 7 songs of jumping, now imagine you jump in the air, but your feet don't land back down because there's so many people, you're stuck to them. Like you're stuck in the air. It was so gross. But after 7 songs, I'm like, okay, I'm done. And I look left and right, and the lines are so long, there's no way out except up and over. So the security guards are there, and I don't know anyone. I have one friend with me, and I said, okay, I'm going to go up. So I jump up, and the security guards grab my arms and start pulling me up over 3 rows of people, you know? So basically, what do they call that?
Crowd surfing.
Crowd surfing. Thank you. Words right now. So I'm being pulled up, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I'm getting out of here. But then I'm like, wow. As I'm coming up, I'm realizing that my pants aren't coming with me. Or my underwear. And I look back, and I kid you not, I'm mooning 30,000 Christians in the air, midair. So I let go of security guards. I'm coming back down. I'm screaming at these strangers. I'm like, pull up my pants. I'm like totally naked on top of their heads. And so they're pulling up my pants. I lose a shoe. I crowd surf out, and I run and I hide in a tent till I'm done. I'm telling you, I lost a shoe. The only shoes I had, I lost one. Didn't care. I was so embarrassed.
Oh my god.
So at the end of this whole concert, I come back, and there's it's just like hundreds of shoes. Everyone's lost shoes. So I was like, oh, there's no way I'm going to find my other tennis shoe. You know, the security guard, he waddles up. He's like, I remember you.
I bet you do.
He's like, I put your shoe over here, and he saved my shoe. So that was a highlight. But yes, mooning 30,000.
Saved your shoe, but not your pants.
But not my pants.
Or your dignity.
And I might have a photo I can appropriate. Show you.
An uncensored photo. But
I would like to know what kind of pants you are wearing.
Capris, you know those like plasticky
Gauchos?
almost
Yeah.
feeling?
Gauchos?
Yeah. And they were so sticky. They slipped right off. So
wow.
it was great. It was
That's
wonderful.
amazing.
Never again. My daughter's like, you did what?
You're not crowd surfing ever again?
Never. Skillet, love you, but never again. Not worth
Once
it.
Skillet listens to this podcast, they're going to be shocked.
That one time.
They probably do. It would be really funny if someone listening was like, "Oh my gosh,
I was at that concert.
I was at that concert in New Zealand.
I know.
I remember your butt."
2007. Reach out if you were there.
Oh my gosh. Well, if people want to get involved with the Christmas campaign or with ROWAN or even support our trip in some way, where could you point them to get involved?
Yeah, I think just loverowan.org has all of our information about our organization. The Christmas campaign is on there. And following us on Facebook and Instagram is a great way to follow our trip when we go in January. And just to get involved. I love storytelling and speaking, so you can feel free to contact as well if you want someone to come to your church or get connected in some way to ROWAN and share the story of our widows and kiddos. So I think that's the best way to get hold of us.
Great.
Is there anything people can be praying about for ROWAN specifically?
Yeah, we are a couple things. One thing is to really pray for our Christmas campaign. We're not even yet halfway to our goal. And the goal was Christmas. God has done this so many times where he just brings it all in at the last minute, and sometimes we extend our campaign, which we'll probably do. But just pray for financial resources to come in so that we can really empower the women the way that we want to. And secondly, I think just pray for all of the widows and all the people involved that are facing this fear of moving, and that they can just really encounter the love of God and feel hope-filled when we go. And that God will show us each step of where the land is and how to do it. We're going to need millions of dollars to move, and so God's going to bring us the right grants and the right people on how to do it. So just to encourage us and to keep praying for faith for us as we step forward.
Well, the next time you hear from us will probably be from Uganda.
Yes.
So very exciting.
Maybe from DIA or Uganda.
Yes, again, any questions for strangers in the airport, leave them in the comments. And
yes.
We have our travel mics and we're ready to go. So thank you so much,
exciting.
Kelsey. We've only
thanks,
scratched the
Kelsey.
surface of your whole story, but this was a good intro. So
Yes.
thanks
Thanks
for
for
being here.
having me.
Yeah.
So fun. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.